So now this old man, 85 years old, he said, give me a mountain. I'm ready to go because, and he gives the reason. He said, if the Lord be with me, then I will be able to drive them out as he has said. So what's our message we get out of that? Do things always happen on our time scale? We may pray, we may pray, we may pray. Sometimes God's saying no. But eventually, maybe our prayer is answered on a particular situation. Steve had a lesson a couple of weeks ago, maybe last Sunday, faithfulness of God. God always keeps his promise. And so it doesn't always happen on our time frame. So we can't lose faith just because there's a delay, quotation marks, in what we're asking God to help us in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move over to some of the actual boundaries. And I'll just try to keep the map up there as we talk through this rather than the word chart. But as you can see, this is the property of Judah, and you'll get tired of looking at my bald head, but that's about the best I can do. The eastern boundary starts about the bottom of the Dead Sea, runs up along the shoreline, up to the south part of Jerusalem. Now, the Jebusites actually occupied the city of Jerusalem. So the property line ran through the Hinnom Valley on the south side, then along the coast of Benjamin, and also over by Dan. Kerith Jearim is right on the border between Benjamin and Dan. And then it goes on up to Ekron and out to the seacoast. The actual point is not shown on this map. Comes down the Mediterranean Sea along somewhere the cities of the Philistines lived, and all the way down to the river of Egypt, and runs across south of Kadesh Barnea, where they had camped some 40 years or so ago, over to the land of the Edomites. And so that's kind of the outline of the property that was given to the tribe of Judah. Now there are some cities in there that we will run into as we study further. En Gedi, that's where we'll find David hiding from Saul. Of course, Hebron, that's where he has his kingdom set up for the first 7 years of his reign, and that's where Caleb had asked that he be given the inheritance. Bethlehem, and a lot of these cities of the Philistines, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gaza, and so forth. So we'll be looking at a lot of those cities as we go through our study next quarter. Okay. All right. Yeah. 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 As we get a couple of charts down, it talks about them being given the lot, second lot. But as Freddie points out, they are located, will be located in the southern part of the land of Judah. And the reason they were given part of this land, it says Judah had too much land for the number of people they had. So as we get a couple of places down in the lesson, we'll refer to Simeon. And you might just make a note too, we'll talk about Benjamin and Dan in just a moment too. Some of these charts don't quite cover all the land, but it gives us an idea of the area. All right, thank you, Freddie. Okay. Now, the other properties that was given to the children of Joseph. This is Ephraim, and some of the boundaries of Ephraim, which you can see, it starts over. Oh me, I got the wrong button. Instead of the pointer. Okay, now we're there. Ephraim. It starts over just about the north side of Jericho, along the Jordan River, and up to, this is Manasseh to the north, the yellow. Runs along the southern border of Manasseh. This is the Canaanite brook or river, and then starting at the sea, there's just a narrow slice, comes down the northern border of Dan, connects with Benjamin over in this area, and back to Jericho. Now there are several cities that also we'll be looking at. Some of them we've already looked at. You remember Bethel? They came down and helped the people of Ai when the children of Israel was attacking Ai. It was Gilgal, Shiloh. Some of those we will run into when we're in Bethel, again, as we study Samuel and some of the experiences there. All right, maybe that's all I need to say about that one. Okay, Manasseh. As you can see, it's just to the north of Ephraim. This is Ephraim down here. So the southern border of Manasseh joins Ephraim and goes out to the sea, Canaanite brook or river. This is it. Up the plain of Sharon, up to where it intersects with Asher will be here. Zebulun will be just a little bit above where this map runs out, and Issachar, and back over to the Jordan River. So there's quite a bit of territory there. Some of the cities are Shechem, Megiddo, Bethshan is over here, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Mount Gilboa, and the Jezreel Valley runs kind of between Manasseh and Issachar. And I guess Freddie pointed out the other night that some of these cities the Canaanites never were driven out of. So we'll keep that in mind as we go through. Okay, now those are the 2.5 tribes that Moses had made the other part promise to come over and help. And these were the ones that Joshua and them gave while they were at Gilgal. Now they move up to Shiloh, wherever Shiloh is at, right there. And that's where they make the other divisions. If you look at chapter 18, the first couple of verses, 2 or 3 verses, Joshua actually gives a little bit of tongue lashing, I guess you'd say. That might be the way I would describe it. He tells these other tribes, you just kind of been sitting back. You haven't been doing much to try to take your land. It's about time for you to get off dead center and go ahead and start occupying some of the land that so he has a group of men, some from each tribe, to go out and, quote, survey the land. He said, go out and write descriptions of all this land, and you bring that back to me, and then we will divide up up the land. So they go out, do just as Joshua had commanded them, and they come back with a description of the land that still is not been allocated to one of the other tribes. And of course, I mentioned earlier, Eliezer, the high priest, and some of the heads of the tribes are involved with Joshua as they start making these assignments to the various lands. And they do that by casting lots. And the first lot fell on the tribe of Benjamin. And I would have to back up here a little bit and see if we can find Benjamin. Well, he's almost in between slides. You can see he is just to the north of Judah, runs over, intersects Dan, and then right above him is the tribe of Ephraim. But Dan, two or three things said about the people of Dan. They were pretty fierce fighters. We're going to have a lesson here, I think it's lesson 20. But in Judges chapter 20, verse 16, it talks about some of these people being left-handed. And they said they could take a rock and throw it at a hare and not miss. Also, when David was running from Saul, I believe it's First Chronicles, talked about some of the men of Dan, of Benjamin, coming to his rescue. And they were described there as being able to throw rocks left-handed and right-handed and shoot a bow right-handed and left-handed. So these guys would be pretty handy to have on your side when it came to fighting. But it's a rather small tribe. And of course Saul was from that particular tribe, the tribe of Benjamin. The next lot fell on Simeon, and we already talked about them being located in the land of Judah. Again, because Judah actually occupied more land than was required for its people. The third lot fell on Zebulun. If I can find Zebulun, where are you at? Well, I lost all of it. That's why I said I needed about 2 or 3 slides instead of one screen. Okay, here we are. Zebulun, located just north. This is Manasseh. Here is Asher, Issachar, and Naphtali. So it's a rather small area of land. In fact, there's not a whole lot said about the cities of Zebulun in the Old Testament. But there's one particular city in the New Testament that I think we probably would remember. Somewhere in this area was the city of Nazareth, the birthplace of Christ. So we will remember that as we go into the New Testament study. The next lot fell on Issachar. And you can see Issachar kind of joins Zebulun, again, just to the north side of Manasseh, over to the Jordan River, and almost up to the Sea of Galilee, and has a connection also to Naphtali. Now, there's a lot of interesting things about this little old bitty country. It is small, but along this Jezreel Valley is some of the most fertile land, and also just south of the Sea of Galilee. Also, there is one of the easy places to ford the Jordan River is located right in this area. I wish I wasn't so shaky. So you would imagine a lot of armies, a lot of caravans and so forth coming across the land of Isca. So we will keep that in mind as we also go through our studies. All right, let's see. The next one was Asher. And you can see it runs from Mount Carmel, basically Mount Carmel, way up, even beyond this particular map. There's the city of Tyre, city of Sidon. So it runs up, it's joined with Naphtali and comes down to Zebulun. And there's not a whole lot that we know about Asher. But we will run into that also again. Jesus will make one of his unusual trips out of Galilee as he goes up in that area. Okay, the next lot fell to Naphtali. And as you can see, it's parallel to Asher. Comes down along the Sea of Galilee, up the Jordan River, and so forth to the north. And there's a couple of cities in here that's mentioned in the Old Testament, Hazor and Kadesh, which is up in Kadesh is up in this area. In the New Testament, there's a city called Capernaum right along there that Jesus will spend a lot of his time at during his particular ministry. All right, and the last lot was Dan. And I'd have to back up here if I can keep from tearing up everything. You can see the corner of Dan right there. It's on the south side of Manasseh, along some of the border of Ephraim, and intersects with Benjamin, and then runs along its southern border, going to Judah. Now, Dan actually left its territory and went up to the north and occupied the city of Laish. And so we hear a lot of in the Old Testament about from Dan to Beersheba, kind of talking about the north and south borders of the land of Canaan. Now, I'm going to go back maybe and talk about some of these others a little bit as time permits. How much time have we got? Another 5 or so minutes. Okay, some of these places we've noticed. On this particular one, Mount Gilboa is here, and the Jezreel Valley is there. Saul and his troops, they were camped at Mount Gilboa. And it said Saul was concerned about what would happen in the battle with the Philistines. So he inquires of God. But at this point in his career, God has just turned his back on Saul. It said the Lord answered him neither by dreams, nor by the Urim, nor by the prophets. So here he is, turning his desires or wishes to someone who lived up in this area, Endor, the witch of Endor. So you remember how he disguised himself, goes up there and asks her to call Samuel up from the dead. Well, that's kind of a strange request. But God allowed this to happen. And Samuel says, "Why did you bother me?" Kind of gives Saul a hard time for even trying to bother me while I'm dead. But he does talk to Saul. And he gives him an answer that Saul does not want to hear. He said, "You and your 3 sons including the good friend of David, Jonathan, said they'll be killed in the battle that takes place in the valley of Jezreel. And that happens the very next day. Saul and his 3 sons are killed. Their bodies are taken and put on the wall at Bethshan. But that night, some men from across the Jordan River, Jabesh Gilead, they come over and take the bodies of Saul and his sons down from the wall, burn the bodies, carry the bones back, and bury them over in Jabesh Gilead. Now, later on, when David is king, he actually has those bones removed and carried back down to the countryside, in fact, in the tomb of Saul's father Kish, and has them buried in the land of Benjamin. So there's a lot of things that we will see happening as we go through the rest of our study. That happens. That was me. A lot of things that will happen as we go into next quarter, particularly involved in this particular area. Does anybody have any questions, comments? This was more of a geography lesson, I guess, than it was anything else. And hopefully it gives us an idea, though, of some of the territory. When you talk about a particular tribe, you have a general idea of where they're located and maybe some of the things that happen within those pieces of ground. Okay. I'm open. And I'll try to stay away from the microphone. Anybody got a question or comment about what we studied today? Well, it's always nice to know you did one of 2 things. You put everybody to sleep, or maybe you got all of it over the way you wanted to. Jeff? Yeah.
We were talking earlier about, on the previous map, how Simeon was eventually just sort of morphed into Judah. I've always thought that when Jacob was blessing his sons, he was speaking with Simeon and Levi at the time. And of course, he talks about how they acted inappropriately with respect to their sister Dinah.
Right.
The last words he says, verse 7, Genesis 49. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. I've always wondered if this may not have been a prophetic reference to Simeon eventually morphing into Judah when they got their territory. There's no proof that that's the case, but this passage always comes to my mind when I think about the map and everybody in the territory.
Yeah, I hope you hear Jeff was referring back to Genesis chapter 49, as Jacob was giving blessings, quotation marks, to all of his sons just before he died. And he referred to Simeon because of some of the actions they had taken when some people had some inappropriate dealings with their sister Dinah. And these guys went over and did some inappropriate things too. But he talked about Simeon maybe being taken in or whatever, just almost fading out, I guess, is the bottom line. So, and we do not read much more about Simeon throughout the rest of Bible history. So I think this was probably, as Jeff indicated, may have been an indication or a prophecy concerning about what would happen to the tribe of Simeon. So they would just kind of be taken in as part of Judah and not as a distinct people. Right. Yeah, Levi they will get cities throughout on both sides of Jordan. And there will be cities of refuge, 3 on either side of the Jordan River. So if you kill someone, quote, accidentally, you had the option of going to that city, staying until you were tried to make sure you were innocent. And if innocent, then you stayed there. No one could come in and do the eye for an eye, blood for, whatever, as the law allowed. And until the high priest, you had to stay there until the high priest died. Then if the high priest died, then you were free to go back to your home country. One thing I didn't mention, though, after all these tribes received their land, then Joshua, he receives his inheritance. And it's in the tribe of Ephraim. It said the hill country of Ephraim, somewhere over in this area. And he goes, builds a city, and that's where Joshua will remain the rest of his life. So he was from the tribe of Ephraim, and he goes back and receives his inheritance. Okay, other comments? Thank you, Jeff, for bringing that up. Okay. Yeah, Freddie will talk about just what I mentioned, the cities that were given to the Levites, cities of refuge, and so forth in the next lesson. Appreciate your attention. And again, I wish I had at least two screens to put some of the words on along with some of the maps, but hopefully you got the general idea. All right. As I mentioned in one of my classes, Jeff, if I had to talk much longer, I'd be like a preacher up here a few years ago told my brother. He said if I'd had to preach a few more minutes, I'd been pumping sand. So I'm out of water. I'd be pumping sand if I have to say much more. So hopefully, James does have a comment.
The east side of the building had nearly as much territory, well, half, 2/3, 3/4, something, but other than that,
Yeah, James' comment was, if you look at the map that I had early on, those 2.5 tribes on the east side, they occupied almost, or at least 2/3 as much land as the other 9.5 tribes combined. So they obviously had some good territory over there. They were not foolish when it came to land. Okay. All right. Freddie will be with you Wednesday night then.